I've been thinking about the new SEC rules that are going to require from next year organizations to disclose their potential cybersecurity breaches and their processes for addressing them. There's a key word in the rules which I've highlighted in my blog, and that is the word material. And I think and hope that this is going to help a lot of organizations make some rather dramatic changes in their risk management activities and risk management procedures. What the SEC is looking for is to provide shareholders, stakeholders, investors, and potential investors, people who might be looking to purchase shares in an organization, with information that will be material to them and to their decision-making process. And that is what material means, is information that would affect in some fashion of significance their decision as to whether to retain, sell, buy an interest in the organization will be material to them. And that doesn't mean it's necessarily some dollar figure. It could be an indication that they're not going to be able to achieve, for example, their earnings projection or their market share projection, or their new products won't be available in the market at the expected time, which again will influence other financial measures. But it's essentially they're looking for information when an event happens as to whether it will be material to the decision making of investors and potential investors. And to me, that's very, very important, because it means that the organization, its chief risk officer and its executives, and to a lesser extent the board who are overseeing all of this, have got to make sure they understand what would be material to the investors, what would influence in a significant fashion and potentially change their decisions as to whether to purchase or sell their interest in the organization. So it's not the traditional measures of high risk, low risk, medium risk, or even a quantification in terms of dollars. It's a matter of, would it be material to them? And we need to therefore understand what would be material to the investor, what would be, and have some reasonable understanding of what that is. We can't necessarily be perfectly in touch and know every single thing that might affect them at every single time. But let's look at that. So who understands what would be material? Well, hopefully the CEO and the CFO, Chief Financial Officer and Chief Executive Officers, and also the head of investor relations. Most organizations of any size have somebody that is in charge of working with the investors. I've seen this be an investor group, or investor function, investor relations function. I've also seen this handled by the treasurer or other organization executives. And then, of course, there's obviously the board. So what this means, I think, is going to dramatically turn risk management on its head. Instead of looking at whether there's a high cyber risk, we need to understand now whether there's at least a reasonable likelihood of a breach happening that would be material to the investor. And typically, the investors are looking at the stated objectives, the publicly disclosed objectives of the organization, its projected earnings, its projected market share, and other factors which are influencing the stock price. So we need to know what those are, and then the risk personnel can work with management to understand, well, what is our process of understanding the likelihood of such a breach that would have this effect that would be material? How are we going to address it? How are we going to minimize it? And then how are we going to detect it when it happens, so that as soon as we detect it, we then got to be able to assess it and disclose it, because we've got 4 business days, to disclose a breach that will be material once we understand there has been a breach. That's important. Obviously, we can't disclose something we don't know has happened. This is an unfortunate state of affairs that most breaches take 6 months or more before the company even knows it's happened. But somehow we need to be able to identify it quickly, move to assess it quickly, and then move to disclose it quickly. But all we have to disclose are those events, those breaches that will be material to a reasonable investor. So what I'm hoping is going to happen is that risk reporting, risk procedures are going to change from simple quantification or qualitative assessment to understanding which effects might be material to the investor. And clearly, if it's material to the investor, it should be material to the organization and its executives and board. So the first thing is to understand what would be material to the investor and what are our procedures and processes around that. Let's get sure those are in good shape. The reporting focuses on that. But then also let's move to the next step, logical step, by saying, well, what would be material to the executives? What would be material to the board? And there again, we are talking about what would be material to the achievement of its stated objectives and strategies. The activities which end up compensating them and also lead to the achievement of the share price. So hopefully, like I said, we're going to move away from these stupid risk registers and heat maps to identifying, assessing, reporting, and treating risks where there's at least a reasonable likelihood, or a source of risk where there's at least a reasonable likelihood that the effect would be material, first to the company, and then secondly, to a reasonable investor. I hope we can move to that. I hope everybody's already looking in that direction, because it's going to take some time to move our traditional processes in that direction. It starts with us recognizing the importance of this word material, understanding what would be material. To me, it's material to the achievement of objectives. I hope that is to you, and I hope you find this useful. Thank you.